but yeah, so the album from the video standpoint, I thought, well, I'm not gonna. It was certainly appropriate to who that group was.
Hmm.
I didn't ever get a sense, again, didn't without knowing who Steve Levine was or anything like that. The
Yeah.
videos did not strike me as progressive. Uh,
Okay.
whereas if I watched a Culture Club video, I would not have thought, oh, same producer, because
Good
Culture
point.
Club videos were very different.
Too
Very,
far out.
yeah, yeah, kind of a, well, we didn't know who or what Boy George was. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't, I liked his voice.
Yeah.
I thought his look was very unusual, but
Yeah.
I liked the
Fun
songs.
music. Yeah.
And so that was kind of the extent of it. Again, I didn't spend my time thinking about the deep stuff
Who
behind
produced
the
it?
scenes or anything. So I
Yeah.
didn't think about like with Dennis. Dennis wasn't on the album. He had died. He had drowned.
Yeah.
I didn't mourn Dennis when I listened to that album. I
Right.
mourned Dennis when Dennis passed.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I mourned him later in life when I knew more about him,
Right.
and got to know more about him through all the different interviews that I did, and
Yeah.
had people, regardless of who I would talk to, they'd all have some sort of nervous laugh when they'd be telling me a story, and I
Yeah.
realized the nervous laugh was really emotion kind of coming up.
I've I've gotten that reaction talking to people too, and it's funny because they all have that same initial. It comes from their heart or something. It's always like, oh yeah, him. It's that kind of feeling, you know. It's
But
yeah,
it's like this.
yeah,
Because they're taking what's up here
yeah,
and they can't help but
yeah.
to try, how do I filter this,
I mean, he must have been a hell of a guy.
he
Just
was a
everyone I've
he
talked
was a
to,
character
he was a
by
character. Yeah.
every account.
So I mean, with it's getting late, the second song on here. What are your thoughts on this one? How do you feel about this track? What do you like about it?
Amazing. It's
Yeah,
amazing, especially the kind of the vamp that Carl goes into in the middle of the song.
yeah.
I'm not even going to attempt it, but
No, yeah, no,
I'm
we can't.
getting tired of waiting. There's no one else around.
Yeah.
Just that whole vamp, and it's just like, and then it comes back into it's getting late.
I love that. I love that transition. So smooth.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because he vamps, and then it comes back into that gentleness, and
Yeah.
then the voices kind of ooze over. They pillow over one another, and they make this just and it's just right back to the comfort of it. Just the
Yeah.
restlessness in his voice when he does the vamp.
Yeah.
He brings that restlessness. You feel the restlessness of whoever he's singing about, whether it's his
Yeah.
own point of view or just someone that you can imagine, or if you've been in a relationship and you're waiting on someone to get home or whatever, but you
Yeah.
feel it.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
thought I thought the song was beautifully done in that respect.
It's always been one of my favorites. I mean, just the level of emotion, the intensity, the dynamics of that song. It's everything you'd want in a Beach Boys track. 'Cause it always delivers. I've heard the song probably 100,000 times, and I still hear something different every single time with the way the vocals blend over each other, the cracks on the drums, that especially that like when they go into the chorus when Carl really picks it up vocally. Um, they nail it for me. That song is like quintessential, perfect '80s Beach Boys. Should have been a massive hit for them. Like that is everything screams hit single on that one for me. Um, yeah, hell of a song. And then track three, "Crack at Your Love."
This
Um,
I
I,
like,
this,
but
I
it's
like this song too,
what's
but it's
interesting to me about this song and anything that Al sings on this album that really has me paying attention
yeah,
is that
yeah,
Al was either kind of, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, he would do a cover song of an oldies classic, or his influence was folky,
yeah, right,
and that's
yeah,
not true on this album.
at all. No, none of
And
that stuff.
it's like the first time when I listened to this album, especially having put, working on the new edition and the next follow up second volume,
Yeah.
is listening to it and thinking to myself, this is the first time, in my opinion, that Al Jardine took who he was as a recording artist and didn't approach it to some Kingston trio thing or some whatever, and
Yeah.
he came to play as a Beach Boy. Like he
Actually,
came
wow.
as a Beach Boy.
I
And
can see that.
it wasn't anything outer influence. It was, this is who I am today, and I'm not gonna. I mean, because they did record at the Hop, and the reason that didn't show up, end up on the album, is because Steve Levine didn't like the way it turned out.
That
Um,
wouldn't have fit.
so, I what I love about "Crack at Your Love," even though it's very high for Al,
Yeah, it
that's
is.
amazing to me. I've been
Yeah.
keeping my eyes on you. I mean, that's above the
He's
normal Al
stretching it.
Jardine register.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I
Right.
imagine if I asked him tomorrow what he thinks of that song, he'd probably say some curmudgeon-y thing about his performance,
He
because
probably have to remake
he's
it. He'd
he's
probably want to
he's,
redo it or something.
yeah, because he's his own worst critic. But
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
like I like the fact that he did it, that he allowed himself to kind of stretch out, that he went ahead and did it, and he went through with it, and that they probably all had to collectively tell him, it's fine, Al, it's perfect, it's good.
Stop.
Yeah, stop
Yeah.
there. But to me, this is a great, and this is him and Brian.
Yeah.
I no, is it this one?
Is it? I can't remember now. Let me.
No, I
I'll
want to
check out
say
the.
this is I want to say this is him and Carl. I think it's a
It is. It's Brian, Al, and Eugene E. Landy as the
oh,
original
okay,
credits.
oh yeah, okay.
The early ones said, yeah.
I will quote Jeffrey Foskett here and think, do you think for 1 minute Eugene Landy wrote any notes
Yeah.
as if
Seriously.
if he could even tell what an E flat from an A flat was? Do you think for even a second? So okay, that's as far as I'll go.
You couldn't tell common sense from uncommon sense. But anyways, yes.
So that's
Yeah.
a good. I like it. I like that song a lot because it's not what I would normally anticipate hearing from Al, and
Yeah.
it's a very Beach Boysy song from kind of
Yeah.
like out of left field type of. It fits very well on the album,
Yeah.
and it's different. It's just different, but
Yeah.
it fits. It's different and it fits, and it's very 80s Beach Boys.
And see, like you said, sequencing wise, it works perfect because those first two songs are definitely introductory. Hey, here's how we sound now. A little bit of the old, and then "Crack Your Love" definitely has that classic flavor, but still the modern production. So it sounds like them, but a little bit
Yes.
of a break
and
after
the
the
and the
intensity of the
love
first one.
theme is throughout all.
Right. Absolutely.
The relationship
Absolutely.
the relationship theme is they just keep it going. And that's the other thing about this album that's so interesting. They don't really get off the relation. They do it a little bit, but for the
Yeah.
most part, this is another relationship album.
Which we know
Which is what the Beach
we
Boys
love
are
writing
known
about
for.
that.
Yeah. So,
And it's gonna look at the credits now. Brian actually plays a synthesizer on this track, which is cool. It was a Yamaha DX1. That's awesome. He also produced did the vocal arrangements for it. But yeah, "Crack at Your Love," I feel like that's probably one of the most untalked about Beach Boy songs in their discography. Whenever I talk about this album with people, it just never comes up. And it's a shame because there's some really great moments on that track. It's definitely worth revisiting if whoever's watching, if you haven't heard this song, um, feel free to jump back into that one. But
yeah.
I like, again, the sequencing makes so much sense because after that song, it's kind of a gentle track. You jump into "Maybe I Don't Know," and this song for me is one of my favorites. I mean, that lead guitar fill, the lick, I should say. The intensity in Carl's voice. The chorus is so catchy with him just ripping through it vocally. This should have been a single too. I mean, this definitely feels proper 80s rock and roll on the radio. Um, just a hell of a track.
It is now, and the commonality between it's getting late and maybe I don't know, but I think
Yeah,
you've got the
very
I
similar.
could get the credits out, but maybe I don't know is Robert White Johnson, Carl, and Myrna, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and it's getting late. It's just Myrna and Carl, and
Oh, I'm sorry, got it backwards. It's Getting Late. It's Carl, Myrna, and Robert Wright Johnson.
Oh, and then
Yeah,
maybe I don't
no,
know. It's just Myrna and Carl. Okay.
with Steve Levine and
What's
Julian
Steve?
Lindsay.
Okay,
Not sure.
Julian Lindsay. He's the guy
Yeah.
who run the Fairlight computer, which
Oh, which changed everything.
it,
Yeah.
yeah, that's way
Yeah.
over my head.
That was the
Uh,
80s. Yeah.
and they were really like Steve Levine was one of maybe three people in the world at that time who did that. Nowadays, anybody can do it with GarageBand.
It's a sample now. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
easy
yeah.
now.
But
But
Steve
back then it
Levine
was
was one of the maybe three people, maybe three, in the entire
unbelievable.
world at that time who knew how to do that, and and he was pretty young too. So Julian Lindsay was the guy who did the Fairlight computer. Uh,
That's insane.
so
Wow.
he was there, and I got lots of behind the scenes photos in the next edition. So you'll see Julian at work with Carl, at work with. At one point, he's got his feet up on the board, so he's not working at all. Uh, but no, these are again. This is Carl to me. This is very much a Carl Wilson album. I think that's one of the other things
Sure.
that I think needs to be said. Is this is
Yeah,
the '85 album was really the last Carl Wilson led project
I agree.
where
I
he
agree.
was there. I know for a fact from what Jerry Schilling and Steve Levine have both told me, Carl was there all the time.
Yeah.
100% behind what they were doing. And if he didn't understand the Fairlight thing per se, and I don't know how much he did understand it or not understand it, but he took
Yeah.
to it. He took
Yeah.
to it. He wanted to know as much as he could. He tried to understand as much as he could. But the rest of the guys were like, Love. He'd just go, where do you want me to be? And when do you want me to be there? And what do you want me to sing?
Well, he's
Now
always hated the studio. Whenever I've heard interviews with him, he hates being in the studio. He hates
he's not a studio. No, he's not a studio rat. He's not
singing songs and be done. Yeah.
create in the moment, right? So if
Yeah.
he's going to write lyrics, he'll do it in the moment. You play me the track, I'll do it. Then we'll sing it.
Yep.
We'll see what we can do, layer it, and then I'm gone.
Yeah. See ya. Back
Because
on
I want to
stage.
take it, now that we've done it, I want to take it on the road. I want to go out there and
Yeah.
perform it and see how
Give
people
life to it.
respond to it. Right.
Right.
It's about
Right.
I think that's why Mike loves Get You Back so much. He went and rewrote it and updated it, give it more adult,
His words. Yeah.
more adult theme,
Yep.
less about cheating on somebody and more about
Yeah.
just rekindling an old love affair.
Right. Right.
And I think if those lyrics had been on the original, it may have worked a little better.
It could have. Yeah.
Or it's impossible to say, but I think it may have worked
Sure.
a little better. But it didn't slow it down. But no, you're right. Maybe everything that Carl touched on this, and he was so involved. Now the two people who were most involved in the Beach Boys were Bruce and Carl. Carl, because he had come, is what we were touching on earlier. Carl came back. Dennis passed away. The group on January 9th, 1984, holds a press conference and say, we're postponing our upcoming concert dates because we need time to process this.
Oh, yeah. Right.
But in that same press conference, it is announced we're going to continue, and we think Dennis would want that, and I do too. I do think,
Me too.
like we talked about
Absolutely.
before, the Stamos thing. Would Dennis have been into the Forever thing? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He would have been all over it. He would have been the first in line.
Yeah.
Girls.
He would have been a full house in a second. Would have not even a second thought. Yeah.
No, he would have been John Stamos' best friend, and Stamos would have loved that even more because they're drummers. Oh my god!
Yeah.
But yeah. So the other one, and because we're coming up on She Believes in Love Again, was
Yeah.
Bruce. Bruce brought Steve Levine in. Bruce had worked with Steve prior on the group Sailor. It's not a well-known group, but that's kind of where Steve got his start, was with Sailor. And if anybody were to Google the group Sailor, they'll find several albums out there. I don't know how easily you can get them. I've never heard them, but I did a little research and put the magazine together and was able to get some of the names of the titles and included one album in particular called, I think it's called Third Step.
Okay.
But they put out several albums. And Bruce, there's a photo I included in the magazine. George Martin, Kurt Becher. Now, if you're a Beach Boy fan, you know who Kurt Becher is.
And there's a lot. You don't get pictures of him too often.
Kurt
It's
Becher,
hard to find.
George Martin, Bruce Johnston, Steve Levine, and then a few other guys who were the Sailor group.
Oh my god. Oh,
George Martin!
that's insane.
So that's not you're working with George. So Bruce is working with George Martin and Steve Levine
No,
before.
no big deal.
So this is just
Yeah.
another Bruce.
Just hanging around doing Bruce
Another
stuff. That's all.
Bruce. This is all. There's so many things in the Beach Boys' career that are because of Bruce.
Yeah,
Whether we like
absolutely.
them or not, a lot of like successful things happen because of Bruce. A lot of very few, very few out of the grand scheme of things, very few things happened with Bruce that we go, huh. For the most part, Bruce, when he would bring somebody in, Bruce was responsible for bringing Mike Kowalski and Ed Carter into the group back in the '60s.
Yeah,
He's the one who told them go audition.
and playing Pet Sounds to John and Paul
I
in
know,
London. I mean, like
very significant stuff. Bruce.
like some huge stuff there. Yeah.
So I think
Um,
so. She believes in love again. Bruce still to this day, because when I worked on the California Music Project back in 2020, that was the song he offered to go on the collection. And what was
he's loved that
amazing,
forever.
yeah, what was amazing is he actually, and I can't play this for anybody for obvious reasons. It's not my property. But he did send me, and I don't know enough about the circumstances, so maybe I'm talking a little out of turn here, but he sent me a version that had Brian and Mike and Al on it that
The
was
2012
recorded,
version.
in 2012.
They actually did the. Ooh, I knew he wanted to do it. They actually did it. That is blowing my mind, man.
So if you can just imagine Brian going, she believes in love again. It's
Oh
quite
my.
it's neat. It's neat. It doesn't change the song that significantly.
Yeah.
Just hearing Brian come in and go, she believes, it's just pretty cool. It's neat. It's pretty neat.
Oh my God. Oh.
It's
All right.
but so he loved that song so much that that was like without even thinking when I said, "Hey, we're trying
Yeah.
to get a song from everybody for that CD we put out." He was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, here." That was, you know, it's like, "Okay, I know this song. It's been out before."
Yeah.
I imagine that's probably why it didn't make. That's why God made the radio. I mean, it is an incredible
Yeah.
song. It's a lovely
Yeah.
song, but it's already been released. So the idea of, oh, I'm going to re-release this again, that from a perspective of, okay, we're reuniting for 50th anniversary, it doesn't make sense to put anything on this album that people have already heard.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, I remember the Rolling Stone interview. I think it was by Jason Fine
Yeah.
that Al kept going over to Brian and saying, "Hey, we got to do Waves of Love. It's got Carl on. And Brian just got up and left for the day." And you
I
would
mean,
think there'd be some minutia of interest because it's his brother, right?
right.
But that
I
tells
mean,
you Brian, from the standpoint of doing a new album, was set on doing a new album.
yeah.
That
Yeah.
free and clear of any posthumously added vocals or anything like that. He wanted to do something new with the boys. And
And the tricky thing with that too is that like Waves of Love wasn't really a known song. To this day, it's still kind of an unknown song. It exists, but it's not super well known. They could have added that and Don't Bite the Sea
oh yeah,
and
oh yeah,
an original version of Soul Searching. Like they could have done a lot with Carl, like the
they could
Monkees
have.
did. They put a bunch of stuff like
Yeah,
we
they
gave
could
you.
have done like it. They could have done a follow up to That's Why God Made the Radio. Took because I know half the material from No Peer Pressure was already done.
Right.
They could have done
Exactly.
something immediately as the actual 30th album of the
Yeah.
group, but that again.
I mean, they always said they wanted "Summer's Gone" to be the last, or Brian said he wanted "Summer's Gone" to be the last song, and so far that might be the case. But yeah,
Yeah,
you're
I
right.
think
Whole different
probably
conversation.
yes.
Um. Anyways, yeah, "She Believes in Love Again." Love that song. Love Bruce's voice on it. Carl doing the choruses. Can't get better than that. Um. Yeah, I dig that one. I have a promo 45 of that one as well, which is pretty cool. Picture sleeve. All right, so side two opens up with "California Calling," a classic Alan and Brian track. We were just talking about this one. Ringo plays on it. Um, it's on the front cover as a potential single. What are your thoughts on this one?
I love it like I love Get You Back. It's like immediately the first note you hear are ding 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 ding,
Yeah.
and anything with USA in it and a lyric, it's Beach Boys.
Right.
So this is just, it's like surfing USA. If
Yeah.
everybody in the USA, it's like a
Right.
California Girls, surfing USA, Mom and American Pie,
Yep.
and it's a rock song. It's
Yeah.
probably the most out of the entire album, the most straightforward kind of rock, balls to the
Go to your
wall
jam. Yeah.
jam.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's out of the entire album. This is the one that I could see why it was listed on the cover, and it should. I really would have liked to have seen it as a single.
How do you think it would have done as a single? And do you think they would have made a video for it?
I don't. I would imagine they would have done the video because of again the time that they were in.
Following the storyline and
Um,
yeah.
but then depending, uh, depending, would they have wanted then Ringo to be in the video? And then would
Ooh.
that have been difficult to get Ringo to come back? I don't know because Ringo played the
Yeah.
July 4th show with them in 1984
Yeah.
in DC. And then in July, around July 10th, that song was worked on
Yeah.
at Westlake, I believe. So
Yeah.
I think that's Ringo he did that show, stayed around, and then boom, came in and did get that.
Sneak
So
around.
so
Yeah.
they also did some recording at Red Bus in London. So I don't know.
Oh, cool. Oh,
So
that's right. I didn't read about that.
it was
Yeah.
that's when the album recordings kind of
Yeah.
started pretty heavy. And in June and July of '84, it was really primarily Carl and Brian who were in London to get the
Yeah.
album going and to get some substance of track
Right.
selection, and so that when the others showed up, they had something that they were working on. But
Work on
California
something.
Calling is a great example. It may be the best. I don't like it more than the material on Sunflower that Al and Brian wrote together, or anything that.
Yeah.
Again, it's not more than. It's I really like this as a Brian Wilson Al Jardine track.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
knew? Who knew? It's almost something like you would expect Mike to have written with Brian.
Absolutely. I always thought it was a Mike song for years until I saw the credits for it. Yeah.
So that's again that speaks to what I was saying earlier about Al really coming to me, in my opinion, Al really comes out in this album as a Beach Boy. This is like Al's really true Beach Boy album.
Yeah.
Because in all the other previous album releases or singles or whatever have you, going up to this album, the '85 album,
Yeah.
Al's either kind of associated as a folky or which is perfectly fine because I liked
Oh,
everything he did. But Come Go
yeah.
With Me, which became a came out on MIU,
About 20
was
hits.
not a hit.
Yeah.
Was then released as a single in '82 at the same time they did the Beach Boys medley, and it became a hit. And they added finger snaps. It's all they did
Yeah.
was add finger snaps, and
That's all
became
it
a
takes.
hit.
Yeah.
It's just like at a sleigh bell or something.
Right.
But no, this is really if you're gonna have a conversation about great Al Jardine songs, this is one of them.
I've always been on the fence with this song. It's always been one for me that, again, as an outsider, I didn't grow up with this album. Whenever I hear "If Everybody in the USA," for me, I was always kind of like, "Ugh, we've done this already." Like it's
Yeah.
always been kind of like
Yeah.
that's a little leaning into the past a little too much. But you get to the rest of the song, the chorus is great, sticks in your head, awesome chorus, and it's played really well. I mean, the execution is there, but that first line for me has always been like a moment. But the rest of the song I really like.
I love the layering. It's
Yeah,
California's kind, dun, dun, and Mike's doing
even-
ring, ding, 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 ring, ding. It's yeah, it's a little, it's a little maybe the word because I can't think of any other word right now. Maybe a little juvenile lyrically,
yeah.
but
I mean,
it doesn't hurt the song. It speaks to
No.
them being a generational loved band.
Right, right.
And that's why I think I think maybe the better word might be playful. Not,
That's a better word.
this is juvenile, but playful, purposely playful.
I mean, its placement is kind of nice because you've had a couple of heavy songs before then, so it's nice to have a bit of a lighter track to in the
Well, yeah,
sequence.
yes, you need kind of a you need to be left
Yeah,
up let up from the
break it up. Yeah,
ooh,
right.
guys are getting deep
um,
here. But then that's followed by passing friend.
I was gonna say, speaking of getting deep, passing friend.
Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water.
I mean, this is a pretty heavy song. It's not written by any of the Beach Boys. George O'Dowd and Roy Hay are the guys who did this, and Roy Hay did apparently all the instrumentation, according to people I don't know.
Roy was a major contributor to the Culture Club, and then George is Boy George.
Oh my God.
You did not know
Yeah.
that?
Duh. Yeah. Oh my God.
Because you listen to the song, it sounds very because when I did my Steve Levine interview, which is coming out in the summer edition, you'll see one of the songs by Culture Club that I bring up specifically to him is Church of the Poison Mind. And I said,
Okay.
man, the release or the bridge in Church of the Poison Mind sounds very Beach Boys.
Yeah.
It goes ba ba da da, and underneath that is ba 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 ba, and it's so Beach Boys, and then he compares what he was trying to do there, and he compares the Beach Boys with two other groups and what he was trying to achieve. But he was keen that I picked up on the fact that that was very Beach Boys because he said that was on purpose.
Oh, that's
Because
awesome.
so it's interesting. This to me is a nice song, but I will agree in Jeffrey Foskett's assertion that it doesn't necessarily fit for me any more than, although I'm not saying I don't like it, I'm not saying I don't care for it. I think this would have been a great Culture Club song.
Mm.
It sounds like Culture Club.
Hmm.
Uh, it sounds like Boy George could have sung this. Um,
Yeah.
and and I think that to me, in a way, not specifically the same, but similarly, like Forever on Summer in Paradise. Like,
Okay. I see where you're going.
okay, it's there, but
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily fit. And it's executed well and it's recorded well, but it doesn't necessarily fit the songwriting up until this point in the album cycle.
Interesting. So I almost feel that way about I'm So Lonely.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, you're not
so
wrong.
I like the song, but it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah,
Like it's a good song, but it sticks out like a sore thumb. Like it's for me, Passing Friend only works because the subject matter is
right.
deep and heavy, and Carl's voice is great, so he can
Yeah,
sell
Carl's
that.
voice is great. Yeah.
He sells it, you know. Um, Whereas with
What
I'm So Lonely, the next track on the record, it's a little, I hate to use the word cartoony, but it's a little cartoony for me. It just doesn't feel, you know.
I agree and I disagree.
Yeah.
I agree in the way that it has a little bit of a shortening bread, like on the LA album. There's two
Uh-huh.
songs on the LA album which I wish were not there, and they're the disco version of Here Comes the Night and Shortening Bread.
Yeah, sure.
I
Yeah.
wish It's a Beautiful Day had been on that,
Perfect.
and
Yeah.
I don't know what else. There's another song floating around that I can't recall right off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
I would have been fine with the album being shorter
Right.
without those two songs. Now,
Right,
I'm
right.
So Lonely. Where I'll disagree is not because I agree 100% that it doesn't really flow.
Hmm.
Where I think it's a relevant recording is because it's where we get to see Brian at his most emotionally pure, raw form.
Oh, sure. I completely agree there. Yeah.
And unlike Shortening Bread, which is just a
A
um,
goof. Yeah.
this is Brian. This is, I think, the most vulnerable we get Brian on the record, and
Absolutely.
so it almost reminds me of a cut maybe that would have been on Love You, um, in that sense. Like this is who I am right now in this moment,
I'm
um,
following you. Yeah.
and so that's I'm so and I'll say that we haven't got there yet, but I'll say the same about It's Just a Matter of Time. It's just a matter of time. Well, let's talk about that when we get there because that to me is like almost a getting hungry. Um,
Oh, really? Interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm so lonely.
Um,
I just like it from the standpoint. I agree, it's clunky,
mhm.
but you get after California Calling, everything kind of feels clunky. Not nearly as fluid as the first side.
Yeah, the first step is a solid streak. I
Yeah.
mean, it really is. I
So
mean, I'm gonna go back and listen to I'm So Lonely again because now you're piquing my curiosity to read into it differently. So I'm digging that mentality about it. Um, Speaking of which, the next song on here, Where I Belong,
just another
is
home
hands
run.
down one of the best songs they ever did of
Yes.
any album. Of
Yes.
any album, it is
Oh. Oh.
perfect. It is brilliant.
That's a mic
Carl,
drop.
absolutely, it's one of the best songs they have ever done, and it should have been a single. Um, the vocals and the choruses are just beautiful. They nail the emotion. They nail the tenderness of it. The whole thing works, and Carl's voice on it just soars above the clouds, and we're all the better for it. Great
And
song.
and let's talk about the rarity of what this track offers from a listening standpoint. Because in the Beach Boys catalog, there were not many examples where we had a dual lead vocal between Al and Carl.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Right.
rare.
Right.
And
Right.
and that was another thing that, and listening back to this, I went, I'll be darned, Al's really on a lot of this album. And
Absolutely.
and everything he's on is interesting. So
Hmm.
Carl and Al to me are kind of the stars of this album.
Yeah.
If you, for lack of a better word, kind of the songwriting interest, really where the stronger songwriting was coming in,
Sure.
and the
Yeah.
fact that they relied on some outside, contributions. I mean, because Passing Friend is Boy George, I Do Love You is Stevie Wonder. So
Yeah.
it's not a complete album of all original material. And it would have been
Yeah.
maybe nicer if it had been, but then maybe it was a situation of where I know Steve Levine had some say in that, but I know from my interview with him, he was very cautious to not overstep.
Interesting.
So, in terms of inserting his own opinion of what should be where and who should do what or anything like that, he
Interesting.
really left it to Carl for the most part to be the guy making the decisions.
Yeah.
Steve did his best to just be the producer and infer his opinion when he felt he really had to. And there were times, as you'll read when you get the new magazine, that he felt he had to. Um, Lundy, anyway.
Yeah. Can you imagine, man? Good Lord.
Oh, and that
Yeah.
that story continues with Jeffrey Foskett in the next issue. So,
Oh,
it's
that'd be good to read.
some insane stuff. So
Unbelievable.
yeah, Where I Belong. Just again, the lyrics when you're having Al and Carl going this search the world. And again, I'll get the words screwed up, but
Yeah. Yeah.
long as I'm learning where I am, right
Yeah.
underneath that, it's just such a lovely moment. It's
Yep.
really it's. I'm not going to go so far as to say it's breathtaking, but I'll say it's really truly lovely that
The hell
that
of a
we
hook.
get Carl and Al in that exchange
Yeah.
because it's rare that we have
And there's
Carl and Al. It's usually Carl
such
and
distinct
Brian or
voices.
Carl and Mike or Carl and
Yeah.
Bruce or whoever. It's very seldomly Carl and Al. And
Such distinct voices.
yeah, and again, this is why another reason why I think the '85 album makes Al Jardine look pretty cool.
Yeah. Let's make him look kind of hip.
Yeah,
Which he always was, but yeah, you think of him more as the folky guy. So now he's more of a modern guy at this
yeah,
point.
like a
But
modern '80s Beach Boy.
right, right.
He was
Um,
wearing the striped shirt as well as anybody.
yeah,
It was like, I'm here. I'm a Beach Boy, shaved. You
yeah.
went
Shaved his beard
shaved.
off.
They all
Took
shaved
the
except for
haircut.
Carl.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
he was
Yeah,
into it,
well,
man.
eventually.
He was younging it up. That's what Al calls it, shaving, young it up. They were younging it up.
They still looked 40.
Yes.
um, but man, I can listen to Where I Belong all the time. I never get tired of that song, and that was on my list of underrated Beach Boy songs as well. Like, it's buried so deep in the album, but it's like
Yeah, and even at
I
the
think its placement is good because you have a couple of
right,
up and down roller coaster moments, and you
right.
land on that one.
That
And
locks you back in for sure. And
right,
even towards the end of the song where they're doing the da-da, da-da,
yeah,
da-da,
Yeah.
I mean, that's where Mike comes in, and you get that. Oh
Yep.
yeah, there it is. That's
Yeah.
there's the Beach Boys. Just the because Mike's not really in it, but just
Yeah.
having that mix of his voice and that bass roll was just so quintessential to that. Especially when we haven't talked about this much. Especially when there was only one track on the album that had a drummer.
Yeah. Ringo.
Yeah, one song. The rest
From
of
the
it was
computer
drum
band.
machines. So you know when you take that into account, that this album held down the fort, so to speak, from the listening standpoint, unlike Summer in Paradise, where it's very evident that they're using
Yeah.
something other than drums.
They get away with it on this one.
They
Yeah.
do, yeah, and it's because you can feel the percussion, even though
Yeah.
it's not really drums, like boom, chick, boom. You
Yeah.
feel it. And I think again that speaks to Julian Lindsay and Steve Levine's understanding of the Fairlight computer, how to use it, how to work with the DX1, all
Yeah.
those things, and how to implement them into a modern sound at that time in 1984. So
Yeah.
it's
It
yeah,
works perfectly,
I'm
man.
a fan of that song big time.
The lyrics are perfect. Um, Up next, I Do Love You by Stevie Wonder, the incredible Stevie Wonder. They had previously done I Was Made to Love Her and Wild Honey. They were fans of this guy. Who isn't?
Carl
Very cool.
Wilson's favorite Motown artist
We-
is Stevie male. Let me category that.
Yeah.
Categorize. Favorite male rhythm and blues artist is Stevie
Yeah.
Wonder. Okay.
I mean, yeah.
So this for Carl Wilson, which I can't even imagine, was this
Mind blowing for him.
yes, like
Yeah.
I'm getting to do music with the guy that I admire to no end, who I love, like I've got his albums, like this is the
Yeah.
guy.
And he
And
plays harmonica.
yeah. So
Plastic sound is on it. I mean, it's awesome.
so this is this, although it's not my favorite song on the album, it's not
Mhm.
really a standout for me. I love how it's executed, and I love Carl's voice on it, and I love the fact that they got Stevie Wonder involved because I know how
Yeah.
much Carl was a fan of his.
Absolutely.
But for all those reasons, I like this recording on this album.
I'm the same way. I mean, it really is a great song. It's not, I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but it sticks in your head. That chorus lives in your head. I almost feel like Stevie was trying to write a slightly Brian Wilson-esque chorus because the way it breaks like that is almost smile-ish.
I could
It sounds
see that, and one of the things about that recording that is unique to Brian's Pet Sounds Smile era recordings, or maybe even the Sunflower stuff, where Brian started to use the guys' voices as instruments.
yeah,
There's a little bit of that on "I Do Love You" with it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's not words. Their voices are be da 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 da. You know, and that's Al again
Yep,
with Carl.
yep,
Dual, you
yep.
know, dual. See, I got it. I don't know who is responsible, but whoever they are, bravo, because to
Great
get Al and
combination.
Carl on this album so much together is what makes it special to me. Is one of
Work.
the elements that makes it special is that.
Very unique in this album.
Yeah.
And then the last track, it's just a matter of time, basically a Brian song, but he sings it with Mike. Very 50s sort of doo-wop, early 60s, Last Dance at the school prom kind of feel to it.
Do you remember the song?
Um,
You remember the song off of the Made in California box set from 2013? The
mhm.
song that was, I think, a leftover from Keeping the Summer Alive, the Why Don't They Let Us Fall in Love? Do you
Oh
remember that?
yeah, 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 sure,
Done.
yeah, yeah,
Bidoo-bidoo-bidoo.
yeah, yeah.
So that reminds me of this song.
I can see that.
This is exactly as you just pointed out. This is kind of this could go under the heading or the category of Mount Vernon and Fairway. This could go under Getting Hungry. This could go under any of those. Why Don't They Let Us Fall in Love?
Yeah,
You know, because it's just a simple, honest to goodness nod, jaunt. It's for Mike. It's Brian. It really is for the two of them. It's almost
yeah,
exclusively.
right.
And that's why the other guys aren't really on it so much. It's just like it's really that pocket because Brian and Mike were the oldest. Brian and Mike were the ones who used to walk from Mesa, the church, from Mike's church, the Methodist church, and they'd walk down, and it was Brian and Mike's sister Maureen, and the three of them would do three-part Everly Brothers songs, walking to and fro, and that was that relationship. And only Mike and Brian have that relationship. And
Completely.
so when this type of song comes on, including Get You Back, although they didn't write that together, but we'll get to the bonus track in just a minute, which they did write together. That's that very, very specific pocket of time that really, truly, emotionally belongs. I'm getting chills. I'm getting chills just thinking about this. Mike and Brian, that belongs to them
Completely.
only.
Yeah.
And you know, the other Beach Boys will sing on these songs, and Al, I suppose, to some degree, because he was one of the older guys and he was a part of that formation. He went to college with Brian in El Camino College.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of that. But it's really, truly, when I hear doo-wop or anything like that, and it's Mike and Brian singing it, it always takes me back to what I know of them growing up together. Not the family Christmas get-togethers.
Right.
Separate of that. The
Right.
two of them being teenagers together. The two of them and their love for the Everly Brothers. I mean, because that doesn't get talked about very much in Beach Boys history. You talk about what Brian is four freshmen, Carl was Chuck Berry, and Mike was Chuck Berry. Mike loved Chuck Berry. So, but you don't really hear too much about the love of the Everly Brothers, which was very, very relevant
That was them.
for them.
They loved it. Yeah. I feel the exact same way. And I always thought it was, Brian with his four freshmen, Carl with Chuck Berry, Mike with doo-wop, because they loved doo-wop as well. So you get all three of those guys putting their, and then Al with his folk, the Beach Boys. It's pretty amazing. But so it's kind of special to have a song like this on the album because it really is like the last time it's just a Brian and Mike thing together. I'm trying to think off the top of my head if there's anything like that, just the two of them after that. But
it's rare. It's rare. It's rare. And to have the combination of the two of them plus the type of song that it is.
Exactly.
So that's another element that makes it so interesting and unique and rare is not just it's the two of them, it's the type of song that it is. And just if you know anything about their history, then you know that it takes you back to them walking to and from church. That's what this is. Now, I don't think although Eugene Landy has a writing credit, I don't think he knows anything about that. But the bonus cut, which is not on the LP, but was the B-side to the single, Get You Back, and was on the CD as a bonus track, is Male Ego. And that was written by Mike and Brian. Now, from what I understand from my interview with Steve Levine, and I'm still forming this together with Jeffrey Foskett and trying to kind of pull my understanding together. But from what I understand to this point is the track started early on in the sessions, like very early on. And it may have been a leftover from a series of songs that Jeffrey Foskett worked on with Brian and Landy present that were 4 songs. I don't know if I'm going to remember them. Male Ego, Daddy's Little Girl, Let's Go to Heaven in My Car, and there was another one. And for Brian fans or long-term Beach Boys fans who have everything or know everything, then they know that Daddy's Little Girl came out in the movie She's Out of Control, which starred Tony Danza.
Mm-hmm.
Let's Go to Heaven in My Car was in Police Academy 4.
Yeah.
But as Brian, both were Brian solo tracks. And I can't remember what the fourth one was that he told me. But Male Ego, from Jeffrey Foskett's memory, started with those other songs. So that's how far back. So we don't know. I'll have to come back and ask Steve Levine, which I will do, because Jeffrey asked me and I didn't know the answer, was whether or not Steve Levine kept the original track that was recorded at that time prior to Steve coming in and getting involved to doing it. Because I have a photo in the new edition of Mike actually writing the lyrics to Male Ego.
No way.
Yes.
That's like, cool.
Got his tongue stuck out. Getting there writing.
That's funny.
He would probably say, just like the days in Western when I wrote California Girls. took my tablet out down the hall, you know, which is so he's a fascinating guy because anybody who doesn't want to be in the studio, who can show up, have you play the track for him, grab a pen and paper,
Yeah.
and go to town, right? Just is really is not your average day. Not everyone can do that.
I mean, I love that story of him driving to the studio with his wife at the time in the car. And
Dictating to his wife. Good
Here's the words of
vibrations.
good vibrations.
Yeah.
Just write these down. I'm just gonna write good vibrations in the car. No big deal.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah. Insane.
You know, it's like I come up with great ideas in the shower, and I'm like, oh, geez,
Yeah.
I'm in trouble because
I mean,
sometimes in the car when I have an idea, you know, you can record it into your phone these days, but back
right.
then you have to dictate to somebody.
Right. Or just remember it. Yeah. I mean, how do you feel about Male Ego? Because I've talked to a lot of people over the years, and everyone's very split with that song. So, what are your thoughts on it?
I'm split on it. Well, I don't know if "split's" the right word. I'm of one prominent thought process, but there is another element to it.
Mhm.
In terms of, I would have liked it on the album because I think it would have made a really interesting album closer. Because if you take out, and again, we can't because it's just not the way it is. So I'm not playing hypothetical. I'm just saying, if Passing Friend was not on the album and Male Ego was the album closer, I think it would have been, or even Male Ego coming after California Calling. Different.
I can see that.
But to me, when I heard, and I told Jeffrey this, and I've told Steve this, when I heard Male Ego, I thought of Dennis Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, the first thought I had was, this is a cool tribute to Dennis.
Oh.
No idea whether or not it was.
Yeah.
But I love that Brian wrote it.
Yeah.
Brian started it because for all we know, he's talking about Mike. I mean, honestly, we've had enough history. We don't know one way or the other. But Male Ego, I could also see coming from a term that Eugene Landy came up with.
Yeah, right.
You know,
right.
Like, I mean, because Landy went and came up with the Brains and Genius name.
Good for him.
Neither brains nor genius. So I guess both were for Brian.
Yeah.
That's all. That's not all I'll say. I'll say something later at another time.
We all agree with you.
When we talk about the next issue.
Arguing against you here.
When we talk about the next issue, we'll get more into that. But I like it because it's, again, you don't, when you hear the first notes, you don't recognize, oh, this is a Beach Boys song.
True.
So it's not immediately that you know, but I like that it represents a true collaboration between Brian and Mike, which we don't really get on the album.
Yeah.
So that I love. I love that. I love that Dennis was gone. They decided to carry on, and here we have a song similarly to California Calling that is kind of more to the machismo element of what the Beach Boys represent.
Okay.
And that is where I kind of made my own subjective connectivity to, if there was any intention behind this being kind of as a tribute to Dennis, I like it. Because from that perspective of the most machismo of the group isn't here anymore.
Right.
It reminded me of him. And I liked that it reminded me of him. And again, I don't know what their intentions were. I hope to talk to Mike before the next issue so that I can include.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, that'd be cool.
I mean, I know I'll see him, but I don't know if there'll be, it's my intention to talk to him about it.
Yeah, yeah.
So to me, though, it's like when you don't, I would have liked it again. I would have liked it better on the album because as a B-side and a bonus track, it seems like an afterthought.
It's forgotten, right? Yeah.
Like, this is something else we did, so here it is. I mean, if you're going to go that route, why not put then At the Hop as a B-side to It's Getting Late or
Exactly.
or She Believes in
Exactly.
Love Again, or
Right.
California Calling with At the Hop on the Bay. So again, what if you're going to have the afterthought recording? But I don't think it was an afterthought. I think it was more like they did it and they liked it, which is why it did get released. But
Yeah.
it just maybe in Steve Levine's as the producer didn't like the way, this is the album, that's an extra track, and we'll put it on the CD and we'll put it on the B side, because then we'll get people to buy the CD who maybe they have the album, but we'll get them to buy the CD because it's
Brand
on
new
the CD.
technology. Yeah.
Yes, and that was one of the things that was very common in those days, that you'd get an extra track if you bought
Yeah.
the CD, not the LP, and it was very common practice in those days in the 80s going into the 90s that you would only get a select track if you bought a CD EP, or the single, that you would get the song on the backside that's not on
Right.
anything else. And
Yep.
that's a very common thing. Like in our first interview, I told you about me and Kiss Alive 2, and
Yeah.
that Kiss Alive 2 had an entire side of leftover things that didn't end
Yeah.
up on anything.
Right.
So it's not unusual that a band would record more. But what's also unique about this, Giggins, is that this album was an album where they came in with all new material. When they started, they
Yeah.
didn't bring anything with them
Which is new for the time for them.
that was anything like, oh, I have a song that I've had for a few years, or oh, I wrote
Yeah.
this song last year. Maybe with the exception of Male Ego, if the timeline between what Jeffrey Foskett was telling me
Yeah.
works with that being done prior to the track, anyways, being done prior to them signing the album, and that may have been a reason. Now, if Steve, and again, I'll have to find out if Steve Levine did keep the original um, track, that may have been a reason why it didn't end up on the album,
Could be.
because it wasn't his work, it wasn't his production. That could have been
Right.
an element of it. So I don't know that yet, but I will do my due diligence to find out. But I do like the song, and I liked that when I first heard it, I thought of Dennis.
It's funny you mentioned I've never once thought it would be about Dennis, but now that you say that, I can see him singing this song and selling it completely because it would have been on brand for him. Um,
I,
I
it's
can see
interesting
him,
you say that.
his raspy voice, and the only reason why I say that is because I'm back and forth on this song all the time because I cringe every single time I hear those tasty ladies. Like whenever I hear that line, I'm like, no, 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 no. Like no,
That would
no,
have been
stop.
now. I think Mike singing the main like he does. Dennis
Yeah,
coming in singing those tasty ladies would have
perfect,
been perfect.
perfect
Nobody
for
would have
Dennis.
thought anything about it. It would have been
It's weird
perfect
when
for him.
Brian sings it. It's
Yes, it's
weird.
weird if Brian sings it. Very much like Hey Little Tomboy.
You're
Yes,
right.
it's weird.
It's weird.
It's
But
weird.
Dennis, he
Dennis,
was the
no.
ladies guy.
Because from him, it would have been like, that could mean anything.
It for me, it's very much like his line on Girls on the Beach. He comes in for that one line and he sells that song.
Oh,
That
yeah.
song
The
Dennis is that way.
sun in the air. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear the song, you're just like, who is this genius? Um, I can totally see him nailing that tasty ladies line. But like for me, this song has always felt a little weaker than the rest of
Yeah.
the songs.
Yeah.
It's got
Yeah.
the production, it sounds like of its time, it would have fit the album just fine, but it's got just enough of a weakness to not fit in. And I'm not sure if that was the case or if they were like, hey, the record has, we're still structuring albums to the LP on vinyl. There's no more room on the record. This is what it is. We
Yeah.
just came out with this new thing called CDs. Hey, let's toss it on there. Who cares? Um, Maybe that was the case. Steve might know more.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a song that I don't go to very often. And when it comes on, I'm always kind of like reminded of it. We're like, oh, here comes that line.
I think that's why I enjoy when I listen to the CD. The CD
Yeah,
is that it's just there automatically.
but it's just there for you,
It's just
right?
there for you. So you
Right.
can put it on and listen, and it just comes on, and you're like, well, so it's kind of the album closer if you have this CD.
And yeah, right.
And it doesn't disrupt it. It's kind of an interesting song. If Get Your Back is your first song and then Male Ego is your last song, it kind of gives the album an interesting bookend feel. It's
Yeah.
almost like this is new music by the Beach Boys, but this is an end of an era.
Oh, completely. It was a brief moment in time and it was gone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I mean that's a good segue. I mean the longevity around this album, the life that this album had. I mean, growing up, this album was not talked about by any Beach Boy fan I knew. And when I started going on message boards and stuff, it would pop up here and there, but it wasn't. People were way more interested in like Sunflower and stuff,
and,
which is of course,
yeah,
justified.
that's understandable.
Right. Um, no one talked about the Beach Boys '85 Still Cruising. That just did not come up, and maybe it was new at that point, so it just wasn't worth talking about. But
Right.
these days, I feel like I meet more people online who are 21, 22 years old, and they're like, I love the Beach Boys '85 album. It's a great album, man. And I'm like, that's awesome. I don't know how you found it, but great. Like, because it's not talked about. And you were there, so you saw it come to life. You were there as it was new. They were touring for it. As an outsider growing up after the album was even released, it's a bit of a mystery album because it's like, oh, the Beach Boys were on MTV. Cool. They have these great songs. Cool. How come no one talks about this album? Like, there's some great stuff on it. What do you think happened? Why did it fall out of the
I
public?
I don't really honestly know because as I mentioned in our first conversation, the thing that I absolutely adored about that period was I love that album.
Yeah.
And for that to have been followed up by Made in USA with Get You Back included, followed by Rock and Roll to the Rescue and California Dreamin', the
Yeah.
following year was like, this is so cool. This is, I mean, that to me, that's one of the best compilations of their catalog
Absolutely.
because again, it was in the time of the MTV era, and they had such great videos. They for the '85 album, the videos were okay.
Yeah.
They necessitated what they needed to do.
Right.
But on this collection that you're holding up, the videos were 100% home runs. They
Oh,
made the songs even better.
that California Dreamin' video is awesome. It's
And then it got played on Stranger Things in the soundtrack last year, and it got a whole new resurgence. And the folks at Universal and Iconic went and did the high def version of the original video and
Yes.
posted it again.
Thank God.
It was amazing. And somehow, the Sounds of Summer did not include that song.
Who slipped on that one, man?
I don't know. But when you have so much, to anybody's point who would say that, because that was my thought, is how do you miss that? Because look at if that had been on that collection, you would have sold more for sure because of the coverage it got and exposure it got from Stranger Things.
Right.
And nobody could see that coming, I guess. So that's fair.
True.
And when you have a catalog like the Beach Boys have, it's really got to be a difficult challenge to say, how do we cherry pick and bring in? And I know that all the guys were involved in approving what was going to be on that big expanded Sounds of Summer. So that fans are so subjectively what we love from any perspective, whether any era. So it's a hard. I would have liked it on there, and Rock and Roll to the Rescue. I would have liked very much to have been on there.
That song has disappeared to the ages. It needs.
I don't understand that. I will tell you, as much as I was in Pennsylvania again in June of 1986. I had just gotten out of broadcast school. And I believe it was my grandparents on my mother's side. It was their anniversary. I don't remember what anniversary, but it was a significant one. I was too unfocused to care. But I remember I was staying at my aunt and uncle's house. We got to Pennsylvania, and I guess based on how much room they had at my grandparents', I went over and stayed with my aunt and uncle. And I never stayed with them before. And I remember, just as I remember walking through the house in 80, 81 and looking at the TV and going, this sucks, to their live Washington, D.C. performance, which, by the way, their 84 performance was excellent. So they got it pulled together. But in June of 86, I walk out for breakfast, and on the television is the premiere of this brand new Rock and Roll the Rescue video, and I had to sit down, and I could not believe how much fun it was, and
Yeah.
how much everything, like the things we've already touched on from this album, that it kind of had that same momentum to it and that same feeling and that same, and where they get contemplative, well, they went back to a Mama and Papa's tune,
Yeah.
and they waited several months. So it was the fall when California Dreamin' comes out. They had already recorded California Dreamin' for the Rock and Roll City cassette, but from what I understand, that was not something the group approved. That was still kind of demo-y, because Carl Wilson gave Les Chan, who's no longer with us, rest his soul. He did an interview with Les Chan, and he told Les, asked him about that version. This was 83 or 83 or so before the 85 album even happened.
Right.
And he asked Carl about that version. He says, yeah, I wish Michael had not released that. I don't think it was finished yet.
Wow.
So then they got their proper due, right? A handful of years later, 2 to 3 years later, they properly finish it. So it turned out to be a really great production. And so again, I just think that's what I love. For me as a fan who is in the moment, who is like just turning 20, 21 years old. I was 21 in 86 by the time Rock and Roll to Rescue came out. And I'll tell you, I just was like, this is fun. This is great. This is cool. And then they just upped the cool meter when they did the California Dreamin' video. Because nobody expected them to show up in a black and white video after Rock and Roll to the Rescue.
Yeah. Total 180.
Yeah, total 180. He wasn't some nerd in a bubble.
Right.
Right.
Much needed for their cool factor to have a video where they're serious. It's a good song.
Exactly.
Out on the lead vocal. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
And again, Al, they reconnected Al to the oldies, the guy that does the oldies. They reconnected it to him. But they made everything about that recording, which is why it's still so popular to this day and why it gets played and why it made the Stranger Things soundtrack, is because it's done so well.
It still sounds fresh.
It's exceptional. It's exceptional.
David, this has been so much fun chatting about this album and the era that produced it. It's very cool talking to you about it too, because you were there, and talking to anybody about anything when something was happening is always more interesting than talking to someone who wasn't there, because the context is there. What are some of your final closing thoughts on the record and its importance in their discography?
I think it's significant that it was the last Carl Wilson-led album. I think it's significant that Al Jardine did what he did musically, vocally, as a songwriter and as a vocalist on this album, on the 85 album. And I think I like it. It's an album that when I go back and listen to now, I like it. I like it. Almost all, it's weird because there's a lot of Beach Boys albums that I will listen to from different eras. Certainly not the 60s, certainly not Sunflower or Surf's Up or Holland, but once they got into the 70s, like even 15 Big Ones or here and there's always a song that may not be your favorite. Keeping the Summer Alive's got a few that I won't go past them, but I will listen to them, but they don't. Well, a good example is the LA Light album, where there's just songs that don't feel like they fit.
Yeah.
This is an album that I can listen to. I still enjoy immensely. And I definitely I wish it were out and readily available to fans so that they could just go get it, or that they could stream it even. That's not my preference, and I don't recommend streaming over having the physical product, but I just wish it were available so that people could, especially in today's technology, that's one of the things Steve Levine told me. He wished that he could go back and kind of rework some of the programming with today's technology to make it sound, a little bit more, just stronger, make it sound stronger, make it, a little bit more solid.
Keep it up.
Because he was ahead of his time. So they got the part.
Absolutely.
And the other thing significant about this, and I don't know if people like this or not, and because this album doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion. I guess most people kind of write it off. But I think another significant thing about this, most of the time in any of the Beach Boys releases up until this album, if there was another producer, whether it was Bruce Johnston on Keeping the Summer Alive or most of the LA Light album, or Jimmy Gershio, or uh, whoever was behind the scenes, whoever the album would be credited to as producer, usually the Beach Boys would produce their track that they're bringing in to some degree
Yeah.
or another. Just to some level, they would help produce it or be involved in the production of it. This album was different. Steve Levine produced these songs.
Yeah.
So that's another major difference. Now, again, depending on if you don't like Culture Club, then maybe you may not like that information. But to me, that's a very significant thing that the Beach Boys, as a group, were willing to go forward musically as an entity and invest their time and their energy for the first time in their careers, A, not understanding the technology they were working in, and
Yep.
B, working with an outside producer, which they had never done before. So,
Exactly.
and it was a big step for them, a significant step for them as a music entity. So that is another important historical element about the collection that that I think is worth, that has great merit.
I completely agree. And for me, this album, I always see this album as Carl's baby. Like, he knew what they could do. And like the late 70s into Keeper the Summer Alive, I've always got the impression he felt underwhelmed, or not underwhelmed, but they could have been better. Because you think of the early 70s stuff when he was in charge, some of the best stuff they ever made.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he always saw their potential and wanted to get the other guys on the same level of excitement and artistic
Creative,
depth,
yes,
creative depth,
creativity,
right?
yes.
So when this opportunity came up to work with a new hot producer who knew what he was doing, they had good good songs picked out, great players, and they were ready to jump into this new world that, from between 1980 and 85, so much changed. MTV, instruments, computers, etc. They were a whole different band, also because Dennis was gone. But for me, this album is Carl's baby to prove that they were a new band making new music for a new audience. They weren't just resting on
No,
their old stuff.
exactly.
And it's the last time we had a full, quote unquote, full Beach Boys album.
Yeah.
With Carl.
Well,
Um,
that's right. That's another significant element here. This is a situation where and the other thing that I mentioned, very exactly to all the important things you just touched on, was the fact that these guys showed up not with previous ideas or thoughts of what they were going to be doing.
all fresh.
All
Yeah.
fresh, all fresh.
And
There's very
open-minded.
few, right?
Yeah.
So there's very few albums in their entire catalog where that happened.
Yeah.
Their entire catalog, because
Yeah.
you go back even to their early successful '60s albums, they had carryover songs. Like That's Not
yeah.
Me. That's Not Me was written in '64. So that was a carryover. It's
That's
just that Mike and Brian started. That's the only Mike and Brian track on the entire album. That
true.
started in '64, and
I mean, yeah.
so again, typically they had some sort of leftover something or other. I mean, Keeping the Summer Alive had When Girls Get Together, which was from '70.
That's an 11-year-old song. Yeah.
So typical. So that was typical. Or they would just do a cover song of like At the Hop, which didn't make the album. So that's another historical relevant factor here, is that they came forward and they said, we're here to write songs, and Steve, we want you to produce us. It was very different for them. It was like, we're not going to produce ourselves. You're going to produce us.
Which was the best move they could have made, because they had spent years doing that and not getting results. And here they are. I think the album peaked at number 26, which is an excellent showing for them.
Yes.
It was
Having been gone 5 years for an album, between albums.
Right. I mean, they came back with a fresh new sound. MTV I think the market was hungry for that kind of stuff, so they nailed it. It was right place, right time. Um,
Yes, yeah, it sure was.
my God, but David, thank you so much for chatting about this record. It's been so fun to chat about it because I've only done one review about this thing in the course of my time doing this. So it's been fun to go back to it and deep dive. And for everybody watching, put your comments below about your thoughts about this record and your favorite songs and your memories about it. Love to hear your thoughts on it as well. But David, man, thanks so much for doing this.
It's a pleasure. And I just want to remind anyone who's not a subscriber to Endless Summer Quarterly, the summer 2023 edition will be available for individual purchase beginning Friday, June 9th, which is one day before the 38th anniversary of the Beach Boys 85 album, which was originally released on June 10th, 1985. So it'll be available for individual purchase, but that's $10 a pop. Now, if you want to save money on this 48-page magazine that comes out 4 times a year, if you subscribe, and I'm just going to give you the US subscription, but we do worldwide subscription, so it doesn't matter where you live in the world. You can just go to our website. When you go to esquarterly.com, ESQUARTERLY.com, you'll see at the top there's a button that says Magazine Subscription. If you click on that, you'll see the video testimonial from all the guys, and you'll see the postage rates from around the world to subscribe for 4 magazines. So in the US, if you subscribe for 1 year, 4 magazines, it's $30 for 4 magazines. So you save right there.
Yeah.
Buy them individually, which you're more than welcome to do. It's $10 a pop. And I'm going to tell subscribers, this is volume 1. The summer 2023 edition is volume 1 of a 2-volume set. And it actually says volume 1 on the front of it. Because
cool.
I wanted to convey this is 2 parts.
Yeah.
So if anybody goes to the ESQ website right now, the address I gave, you'll see the cover right there on the front homepage.
And the links are all below in the
Yep.
description box if you're watching this on YouTube.
Wonderful. So thanks again, Giggens.
Thank you so much, man. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.